Hey folks, there are a bunch of new minions in Hearthstone's new mode, Battlegrounds, and I wanted to talk about them.
Hey, buddy, watch this.
That's right, some of the minions in Battlegrounds you'll know, they're old staples you've seen a million times, maybe some you haven't seen in a while, but there's also some totally new minions, and you might not be super familiar with them or have a good grasp on what they're all about. So, of course, I thought I'd walk you through them, reviewing their strengths and weaknesses, and perhaps a few tips here and there on how to use them. I've been playing Battlegrounds all day today. As of the launch, we're like 8.5 hours in. Been holding a top 25 spot on the leaderboards all day, so already getting some good experience and some insights on how to discuss these cards. That said, let's go ahead and jump into it. So starting off here with a tier 1 unit, we have Rath Weaver. He may be a simple 1/1, but after you play a demon, he's going to gain +2/+2 in stats and also deal 1 damage to your hero. Now, that damage might sound scary, but it's really not that scary. 1 doesn't add up that fast. Beyond that, you'll be gaining so much early game dominance if you play this card with a bunch of demons in the first few turns that you'll avoid a bunch of chip damage from losing rounds early anyway. This one could give you an enormous advantage heading into the mid game. Sometimes these things, you can get multiples on board. They're like 7/7, 9/9. I've seen like 13/13s super early in the game just because people can support the Rath Weaver so well, which will help you chip down your opponents, stabilize into the mid game as you start to build out a more solid demon core. So I think this is a fantastic starter minion. You are going to lose some health on the first round or two, of course, because it is just a 1/1 for the turn you buy it, and it's dealing damage to you over the course of the first few rounds, but it sets you up so well for the future. It's the exact sort of card you want to play into top 4 spots, because you're just going to be eliminating people. A lot of people are going to fall off before you even lose a round in the mid game because your Rath Weaver is carrying so hard. And even though it's a tier 1 unit, you can still play it all the way to your final build, which you can't say for a lot of things. So it's a great gold investment that will last throughout the course of a game. Next up here, we have the Azim Overseer. This is another demon synergy card. This time coming in at tier 2. He's a 2/4, and the battle cry will give a friendly demon +2/+2. So a totally fine demon support card here that you can use to just cycle into your demon deck. Occasionally he'll linger around on board for a little while, although not something you typically want to invest a lot of effort into. He's a totally fine option in the mid game just to bolster your board. If you do have some Battlecry synergies along with your demon build, like a Bran, this guy can actually just stack up and add on to that. Also good to keep an eye on for things like amalgam style builds, because he's going to buff your amalgams as well. So nothing about this card is like a home run. He's not going to be the star of your build, but certainly a fine complementary piece that you can buy from time to time. Next up here, we have the Pack Leader, a tier 3 unit that's a beast synergy card. Starts out as a 3/3, and its effect is that whenever you summon a beast, you will give that beast +3 attack. So a couple ways to use this. Number one, during the actual tavern phase, when you're buying units and adding them to your board, this will buff those, just the base level of the unit. So you can buy this, get some alley cats. They're going to be 4/1s right off the bat. Beyond that, the Pack Leader does have some utility in a battle as well. Anytime you have something like a Rat Pack where it dies and it's going to be summoning beasts, this will buff them live on the spot as well. So you can tuck this away on the right side of the board and use some Death Rattle Beast cards to really increase the trading power of those tokens that come out of any of your Death Rattle. So a couple great ways to use this. This is the sort of baby brother card of something we're going to talk about later, which is Mama Bear. That card basically surpasses this one in every way. So rarely will this be something that you play all the way to your end game board state, but it's a great building piece for any beast style deck. It can get you some early wins and can actually make something like a simple Rat Pack a very threatening and fight winning sort of minion. So Pack Leader is fantastic, especially when you upgrade it. It does a lot of work in the mid game. Really solid card and a foundational piece for beast builds. So next up here, we have the Soul Juggler, another demon support card at tier 3. This one's also a 3/3, and it reads, whenever a friendly demon dies, you deal 3 damage to a random enemy minion. So this is another card you can kind of tuck off to the right side of your board if you've got things like Imp Gang Boss that are summoning lots of demons, or maybe some cheap demon taunts. This guy is going to start chipping away at your opponent's board pretty much from the start of the fight, and don't underestimate how good free chip damage like that can be. Whether it's sniping off something that's hiding behind a taunt, that can be great. It can just pop off a divine shield, or maybe just hit something 3 or 4 times and kill a really high health minion for free. Those high roll possibilities are there for Soul Juggler, and even if it's not like killing something or making some incredible play, it's just chipping down health totals so that your minions can more efficiently trade. So in a token style demon build, I can see a couple ways to build demons right now. One is like really big stats with our Rath Weaver we saw at the beginning of the game. There are also some token-y style ones with Void Lords and Imp King bosses. In the more token variety, Soul Jugglers can go a really long way, particularly when you get it upgraded and it starts dealing 6 damage per ping instead of 3. That adds up twice as fast, obviously, but it really does feel like that's a significant breakpoint and it scales much better. This is not my favorite minion to play into the late game. I think, when things have 40 health, 6 damage still doesn't get there perfectly. It's not as good, but certainly towards the mid-late portion of the game, this card pays off a lot, and you can still replace it with better stuff later, but it'll help you win so many rounds in the meantime on the way to those final board states that it's still a great option. Next up here, we have the Vermin Sensei. No, it's a real card. This is a real card, guys. This is from Mean Streets of Gadgetzan. I just figured you probably forgot about it. This card is just like one of the most forgettable cards ever. So I thought I'd throw that in for fun. But you already know this one. We'll move on. So next up here is Siegebreaker. Just kidding. Siegebreaker's in the classic set now, guys. Come on. Okay, for real now, moving on to tier 5, we have the Annihilin Battlemaster. This is one of the most big iconic cards of Battlegrounds so far, I think. This one's really cool because although he's a 3/1, he will gain +1 health for each damage your hero has taken. And since you start out with 40 health, right, this could gain up to 39 health on basic heroes or even more with Patchwork. Think about that synergy, right? And then when you have things like doubling battle cries, it can go even farther. And then when you triple it up and all of its stats are merged together, this thing can get crazy ginormous. Now, it does only have 3 attack, and sometimes that's a limitation, right? Because even something that's like a 30/30 trades pretty well into a 3/200, right? Like that's gonna work out fairly well for the 30/30. So you do need to buff the attack of this one sometimes to make it feel more significant. There are a handful of different ways to do that, of course, but even if it doesn't have high attack, it can just eat a lot of hits, tank things while other higher value attack minions are doing their work against your opponent's board. It is quite susceptible to things like poisonous as well, so you have to be careful depending on the game state. But nonetheless, this one's usually something that's still great to toss into a build and can get those fantastically large numbers that are great in this mode. Moving on here, we have Goldrin, the Great Wolf, a new beast synergy minion. It is a 4/4 with a death rattle that gives your beasts +4/+4. So this is a great way to start off any fight in a beast build. You play this over to the left, it dies, and it's buffing, theoretically 6 minions for a total of 24/24 in stats. So although it looks like a 4/4, in a lot of ways it's actually kind of a 28/28 in a single unit, which is very, very cool. Even if you don't have a lot of beasts, or you just maybe have 3 or 4 beasts, you can still get some dividends off of the Goldrin. And then, of course, when you upgrade it right, the stats just start going crazy with 8/8 buffs on Goldrin, which is amazing. So although this is perhaps in a different direction than something like Pack Leader or Mama Bear, you can build kind of 2 varieties of beasts, maybe a more token style, maybe a full-on big-time stat style. Goldrin's probably better supporting of the stat style. If you do the token build, often Goldrin won't hit the tokens because you play your Goldrin to the left and your tokens haven't died yet, although you can move her more mid to late in your rotation so that she does die after some tokens have been summoned, but that's just a little bit less consistent and predictable, and Mama Bear probably just supports that plan a little better. So Goldrin's not like my favorite beast synergy support card, but is certainly serviceable in plenty of late game builds. Moving on here to Light Fang Enforcer. This is a card I really underrated for a long time. Even when I went to Blizzard to play test, Mike Danae was like, dude, don't sleep on Light Fang Enforcer. It's a really good card. And I was like, really? It's just a 2/2. It's just buffing a few things, +2/+2. How does that add up fast enough? Well, even over something like 2 to 3 rounds, Light Fang Enforcer can make an enormous impact on your board as long as you have the right kind of board to support it. So this is not going to be good if you only have like 1 or 2 things, but if you can get to 3 or 4, the Light Fang Enforcer really starts to stack up, especially, of course, if you triple it. That +4/+4 is going to scale like crazy. And as long as you've gotten into a late game state where you have a reasonable health total, you're not like getting demolished in fights, I often think Light Fang Enforcer is worth the investment. You're going to lose a few rounds with a crappy 2/2 on board, but it's going to pay off so much in the continued stacking that it'll be worth it. You can eventually sell it later when you get down to like your final fight or two if you think you can make a more impactful minion on board than the last remaining buff the Light Fang Enforcer would provide. So it's not like you're foregoing a gigantic set of minions, you're just building some up and then maybe moving on from the Light Fang. But this can be the absolute centerpiece of some game-winning sorts of builds, so do not sleep on this card. So next up here we have the Ghast Coiler, which is like sort of a new minion. It actually did appear in Rostakon's Rumble, not in the collectible set, but in the single player stuff. So it's familiar, but still new enough, not something you see in the collectible set in Hearthstone. So I thought I'd talk about it. Now, when it comes to the Ghast Coiler, I think this is a bit of an overcosted minion. I don't really feel like I get enough value out of this at the tier 6 slot. It's one of those things that's totally fine to splash into a build. Like if you discover this off of a triple upgrade and you don't really have anything else, there's no synergy options, and you just need a minion to plop on the board, then certainly Ghast Coiler can serve that purpose. It's totally fine. It's serviceable. But ultimately, Death Rattle minions have a little bit too much variance, I think, in Battlegrounds. There are some really weak ones, right? If you think about like Mecharoo, for instance, coming off of your tier 6 minion, you're not happy. Now, you can also hit like Gores Apprentice, and that could be amazing if you're like a mech deck, but it's just so unreliable and so inconsistent, and it doesn't have a big enough base stat line that I don't think that risk is really going to pay off. So to me, this is one of the weaker options at the tier, maybe the weakest option at the tier, and in most cases a minion I tend to avoid. Even in something like a beast build, I just don't think it does enough or supports your build directly enough. So for me, the Ghast Coiler just doesn't get there. So next up is Gores Apprentice, a tier 6 minion I like a lot more. This is a 4/8 with a death rattle that will summon the first 2 friendly mechs that died this combat. And this is a fantastic mech build support piece. You can build some gigantic mechs with divine shields and death rattles and all this high value stuff. And if you give them taunt, they're often going to be the first things that die. And that means you're going to get back some enormously high value thing, like an upgraded Mechano Egg, for instance, is amazing off of your Gores Apprentice. So this one is just great for that final piece or two of a mech build. If you can't get a full board of gigantic Divine Shield mechs, this is the next best thing. And in fact, kind of delaying some minions can be great in Battlegrounds. You have issues with board space and death rattles and things get a little too crowded. If you can like let some stuff die, use something like Gores later in the fight to reload your board, it often works out better. So in some ways, like banking a minion for later instead of playing all your big stuff at once can actually work out nicely. Gores fits that incredibly well. This is a great centerpiece, awesome follow-up minion, really, really strong stuff. So next up here we have Mama Bear, the upgraded version of Pack Leader that we teased earlier. Clearly not just an attack buff here, but health and attack, and it gets to 10/10 later when you triple it if you can, which is absolutely nuts. And again, much like Pack Leader, this can be something you just plop on the board and then play Beast after to significantly improve them. Something like a Cave Hydra, for instance, gets kind of substantial just on a single Mama Bear, and that can be nice. Also great with token builds where you have that Rat Pack die, and it's then instead of summoning a bunch of 1/1s, it summons some 6/6s that trade really nicely into the board, or maybe 11/11s if this is upgrade. I've even seen people with multiple Mama Bears, an upgraded one and a normal one, so that things are getting 15/15 when resummoned, which is absolutely nuts, needless to say. Now, Mama Bear can, unfortunately, be a little weak if she gets sniped, for instance, by a card we're going to talk about here in a second, or if things die in the wrong orders. The kind of return on investment here for Mama Bear is limited, but nonetheless, I do feel like there's so many times this card has flipped a battle on its own, and I've been like, oh my god, Mama Bear is so good. So she definitely makes those positive impacts and can make that token beast build work really nicely. So this is certainly something you should be keeping an eye out for really as soon as possible. And then finally, our last card here, it's Zapsy Wick. I love the artwork on this card. It's so Hearthstone-y and it's so cool. I wonder if that was rejected art for Boomsday Project or if that comes from some other era. Anyway, Zapsy Wick has Wind Fury, which means, unlike most minions which attack once, he will actually attack twice as long as he's alive. He also has an effect that reads, this minion always attacks the enemy minion with the lowest attack. And that's really crazy good in Battlegrounds because there's all kinds of stuff you need to snipe. Think about, for instance, if your opponent has a Khadgar that's going to be doubling up all their summons, you don't want that to happen. Boom, you drop a zap, and the Khadgar is most likely going to die right off the bat because 2 attack is so low, that's probably going to be their lowest attack minion. There are also things like Baron Rivendare. If they have like a Death Rattle build, you snipe their Baron, you're really happy. Maybe even their Mama Bear is the weakest minion on board. You snipe the Mama Bear, you deny them their kind of token synergy plan. So Zap can go a really long way despite the fact that he is a mere 710, which in the scheme and scale of Battlegrounds isn't very significant. This guy still presents sort of a tech answer to a lot of what your opponents are trying to do. And if you know you're going down to the final fight or two and you got to snipe that Khadgar, Zap's a great addition to your board. I'm not going to say he's perfect for all games and board states. Sometimes those final boards are just a bunch of 30-30 pogo hoppers and this guy does nothing. So definitely be careful for when you use this, but don't overlook him. He's a great utility, a great tool for those moments that demand him. And there you go, folks. Those are the new minions from Hearthstone's Battlegrounds, including Vermin Sensei and Siegebreaker. But seriously, a lot of cool new designs here that you need to get familiar with. You need to understand how to build around. So hopefully this gave you a little bit of guidance on how to use these, which ones I think are stronger, when to use them, so on and so forth. And that'll help you gain a little advantage in the Battlegrounds. Again, I've been having like a ton of fun with Battlegrounds. This is seriously legit. Maybe the most fun I've ever had in Hearthstone. Thankfully, we're doing pretty well so far, too, with the top 25 spot, although that's probably going to fall as I'm currently not playing, and it seems like people just keep leapfrogging. So we got to get back in there and try to defend our leaderboard position. But that said, if you guys have any questions, thoughts, insights on these cards, something I forgot to mention, something you disagree with, please feel free to share it. I'm certainly not the only expert around these parts. You guys are very smart and good at the game, too. So share those takes. If you enjoyed this video, you want more Battlegrounds content, of course, please hit that subscribe button. We're pushing for 100,000 soon, so it's all incredibly appreciated. Even if you see all my videos and you recommended videos and browsing and so on and so forth, it's still nice to get that sub. So that said, thanks very much for watching, and until next time, game on.